are listening to The Common Sense Practical Prepper, sponsored by Duct Tape, the real duct tape. It fixes everything, except bad decisions. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America. From border to border, coast to coast, and all ships at sea, here is your host, Keith.
Everybody, this is Keith, and you're listening to the Common Sense Practical Prepper podcast, April the 10th, 2026. So in keeping with our series about going back to basics, we have talked about our basic pantry, our food buffer, and storing water. Let's move on to the next piece, and that is sanitation and personal hygiene. A lot of these things like this we take for granted. Personal hygiene, you're like, well, I'm just going to keep myself clean. Sanitation, I'm just going to take the trash out. But in an SHTF situation, it might not be as easy as you think. Here's a little background. For most of human history, poor sanitation has been the number one killer. Bigger than wars, bigger than famine. In the 1800s, big cities like London and New York had open sewers running right through the middle of the streets. So cholera, typhoid, dysentery killed tens of thousands of people every single year. In 1854, a doctor named John Snow. So Dr. Snow figured out one single contaminated water pump in London was causing a massive cholera outbreak. He removed the pump handle so folks could no longer use that particular pump, and the deaths in London dropped off dramatically. So this was one of the first big moments, the first big aha moments when people realized that clean water and handling water correctly is vital to human existence. So once cities started building real sewer systems, treating drinking water with chlorine and teaching basic hand washing increased life expectancy by decades. So diseases that used to wipe out whole neighborhoods and whole towns basically disappeared in the areas that had good sanitation. So here's why I bring this up. In a major disruption, whether it's a hurricane, a long power outage, supply chain hiccup, modern sanitation practices can fail quickly. When the power goes out, the toilets stop flushing. Now, depending on where you live and how far you are from the local wastewater treatment plant, there is going to be pressure still in the lines, but eventually those pumps will stop and that water will also stop coming into your home and being able to flush your toilet automatically. Now, you could always throw a bucket of water into the bowl and flush it that way. So when wastewater treatment plants go offline, the tap water that you have becomes riskier by the day. So history has showed us that a simple, realistic plan for waste, hand washing, and cleaning up is almost as important, if not as important, as storing food and water, like we've already talked about. And the good news, you don't need any fancy equipment or expensive gear. A few items that are not very expensive can keep you and your family from becoming a statistic, just like everybody did back in London. So let's tackle this. When the toilets stop flushing. The easiest and most practical setup is a 5-gallon bucket. I know, it doesn't sound very sexy, but a 5-gallon bucket lined with a heavy-duty trash bag, or what I like to use, contractor bags. After each use, throw a little bit of kitty litter, dirt, sawdust. If you got pool shock laying around, for those folks who have pools, anything to control the odor and control the moisture. When the bag gets full or nearly full, or when you get tired of looking at it or smelling it, tie it off tightly and just set it aside. Have plenty of extra bags and litter, sawdust, whatever it happens to be, have plenty of that stockpiled and ready to go. Again, it's not very glamorous, but it works. When I go to Costco or Home Depot or Lowe's, when I run across contractor bags on sale, I go ahead and grab a box of those. Okay, hand washing 101. Bar soap and water is still the gold standard. Keep a good supply of regular bar soap. When I go to the store, the grocery store, the pharmacy, even some of the big box stores sometimes, if they have a sale, I grab the 10-pack, the 12-pack, and just throw it up in my closet. And I always grab a couple out of that block and set it aside and stick it into my pantry. Baby wipes and hand sanitizer work very well, don't get me wrong, but let's use those as a backup for when water is limited. We're talking about having access to water. So we're using the water that we've stored. Remember, we're trying to go for 2 gallons per person per day. That's going to cover cooking, cleaning, personal hygiene, and everything you need in that day. So we're going to use part of that 2 gallon. When water becomes scarce, that's when we want to go to baby wipes or hand sanitizer. And remember, rotate your baby wipes, rotate your hand sanitizer just like you do food, because over time, the alcohol content in the hand sanitizer breaks down and it's not as effective as it was when you first purchased it. And I've noticed about some of my baby wipe containers, even though I haven't opened them, I've run into a few that were several months old and they were starting to dry out. Maybe those particular packages had a hole, but again, just rotate things out. Get in the habit of rotating the hand sanitizer, the soap, just like you do your food and water. Let's talk about laundry. Everybody hates wearing dirty clothes. So again, we're back to the 5-gallon bucket and a clean plunger. Get a clean plunger, not the plunger you're using currently to unplug your toilet, but get a clean plunger, and there is your washing machine. Put your clothes in, a little bit of water, a little bit of detergent, and then plunge up and down for a few minutes, wring it out, throw it on the clothesline, and you got yourself some relatively clean clothes. So let's talk about trash and waste management. We're going back to our contractor bags or double bagging non-contractor bags. So keep a good supply of these heavy-duty bags and twist ties. Back to odor control, baking soda, cat litter, and if you have to burn your trash, please do it safely and only when necessary. We can talk about operational security or OPSEC when it comes to burning things, but we'll just leave that part out for this particular podcast. So keeping extras of everyday items is the way you start your personal hygiene and your sanitation plan. Feminine products, toothpaste, deodorant, toilet paper, wet wipes, baby wipes, dude wipes, whatever wipes you have, always have a little bit extra and set it aside. Start simple, like we've been talking all along. Your 5-gallon buckets. Here in the States, you can get them at Tractor Supply, sometimes 2 for $8, 2 for $10. You might see them 3 for $15 at Home Depot or Lowe's. They don't necessarily need to be food grade, but 5-gallon buckets are very, very plentiful. Get a few of those when you're at the store, pick up a couple extra. You can never have too many 5-gallon buckets. You can never have too much duct tape, and you can never have too many bungee cords. Those are my rules to live by. So again, sanitation isn't glorious. It's not very sexy, but when people get sick from these type of things, they get sick very fast. So we have folks in your little compound or folks in your home that are now getting sick. So they are not able to contribute. Because remember, when we divide up our jobs, we're going to have multiple people that can cook. We're going to have multiple people that know first aid. We're going to have multiple people that know how to use chainsaw, axes, whatever the situation may be. If one person gets ill, really bad stomach cramps, really bad vomiting and nausea, and they're not able to cut wood or do some of the other chores, go out into the garden and weed or grab food from the garden, we need somebody to go ahead and pick up the slack. So we're always going to have multiple people able to do multiple chores. And in addition, when that person gets ill, you have to worry about medication. Do you have the medication to take care of whatever they have? If it's cholera, if it's dysentery, if it's diarrhea, do you have Imodium? Do you have the over-the-counter medication to take care of that? It's like in war. If a soldier is injured, it's going to take 2 or 3 people to get that injured soldier off the battlefield. So if it takes 3 people, so now you have the injured soldier and 3 others. So now you have 4 people off the battlefield. Well, think of an SHTF situation similar to this. If you have 6 people in your compound and 1 is ill, you're down to 5. So now the person who knows first aid or the mom or the dad of the group then have to tend to this other family member. Family member who's down is not going to be able to contribute. And the mom or dad or whomever is taking care of that person, they're being taken away from their normal set of chores or duties to take care of that person. So it's not just oh, we're going to wash our hands so we don't get sick, because getting sick sucks. In an SHTF situation, it takes you out of the plan, of the survival plan, and throws a few wrenches into those gears. But again, it's nothing that we cannot overcome. All right, folks, thank you so much for stopping by. I've got a ton of emails, I promise. I know I've said this the last 2 podcasts. I got a couple fan mail in. Let me cover the fan mail real quick. Reference the Basic Water podcast. This listener asked if I had ever considered washing and cleaning out my 1-gallon milk jugs. I have, but I have not done that. And they keep a 1-gallon jug, like filled with water, whatever, in the freezer, and it acts as a block of ice. Now, I have done that with bottled water, and I put the bottled water in there, and it has multiple uses. One, if the power goes out, that in a sense are several blocks of ice to keep the contents frozen longer. If I'm going on a picnic or I'm going away for a day, I can grab those and throw those frozen bottles of water into my cooler to keep my sandwiches and whatever cool or cold. And so it works multiple different ways. But I guess the only thing I wonder if I use, and I have a milk jug in my fridge, I'm almost done with it. I wonder if I can clean it well enough that if I have to drink the water from it, the milk has not been in there long enough for it to leach into the plastic. What I want to avoid is my water not to taste like milk, but I like the fact that you use them as a ice block and put them in your freezer. That's very smart. In fact, I may try that instead of trying to sanitize it and drink out of it, because that 1-gallon jug will take the place of, my goodness, 8 or 10 bottled waters that are frozen as ice blocks. So I'm going to try that out. That's a very good tip. And something I forgot to mention on the Basic Water podcast was, remember, 2 gallons per person per day. That does not include watering any plants or any garden that you have. So consider rain barrels. And depending on where you live, some cities, some counties, some states, some countries are really wonky about rain barrels and the amount of rain that you can capture, or any rain that you're allowed to capture on your property. That's a whole different story. I personally think that if the rain falls from the sky and it lands in my yard or on my roof, I should be able to use that water as I see fit. I have multiple rain barrels. Maybe I'll go into a little rain barrel episode one time. They're easy to make. You can go to the hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, and get all the equipment for maybe $6 or $8. And it's a lot less expensive than buying the kits online. If you're not a DIY person, and I'm not the best DIY person, you can just buy the kits, and it comes with everything you need to make the rain barrel. All right, folks, thanks again for stopping by. As always, I really appreciate everybody coming by and listening to me ramble. Do me a favor. If you found any part of this podcast useful, please like, subscribe, leave a review, or a comment. It really helps the algorithm, and it really helps the podcast get out there. All right, folks, as always, take care of one another, be careful out there, and until next time.
You've been listening to The Common Sense Practical Prepper. Subscribe, like, drop a review. Over and out.